In about 4 billion years, the Milky Way will smash into the Andromeda Galaxy. Well, technically speaking, the two galaxies will merge to form one big galaxy, which I guess is more exciting than them just smashing into each other. But either way, this collision is going to be a big deal. And it is only the beginning of a much larger cosmic pileup that will change our cosmic neighborhood forever. The Milky Way has a lot of neighbors in this region of space, including several satellite galaxies, the Magellanic Clouds. But by far the largest is Andromeda, a spiral galaxy that's almost exactly like our own and slightly bigger. It's also hurtling towards us at 68 miles per second. Yes, I know that's fast, but don't worry, we have plenty of time to prepare. It'll be 4 billion years before they meet. So if you have any plans that require the next 4 billion years to come to fruition, you should probably make them elsewhere. At some point in the past, Andromeda and the Milky Way were both much smaller and likely had many more satellites than they do today. But over billions of years, they grew larger through a process called galactic cannibalism, consuming smaller galaxies and adding them to their own. Cannibalism is actually an important part of galactic evolution. Most galaxies have eaten at least a few smaller ones. And now it looks like Andromeda and the Milky Way are gearing up for one final big meal together. In 4 billion years, the two galaxies will pass close enough together that their mutual gravity will overcome their mutual inertia and bring them together. This isn't the first time they've gotten this close. Simulations suggest that the two galaxies may have passed through each other several times in the past, each time emerging with a handful of extra stars and a slightly altered shape. These close calls have already made the Milky Way somewhat asymmetrical. And though we can't see what Andromeda looks like from our perspective, astronomers think it will look similar to our galaxy in a few billion years. We'll all be a little misshapen after eons of gravitational tugging. But when they get close enough, the effects of gravity will become much more dramatic. For instance, stars will start to migrate from one galaxy to the other, and huge gas clouds will collapse and trigger massive star formation. Eventually, every star in the night sky will be affected by the merger. And while most of them will simply be flung into new orbits around the new galaxy's core, others will literally fall into the sun. Some fraction of these stars will be ejected from the solar system entirely, and there could even be a few close encounters between the planets and rogue stars. This period of chaos will last for billions of years because the size of a galaxy makes the process of merging two of them together really freaking slow. We're talking hundreds of billions of individual interactions between stars. But eventually, the two galactic nuclei, the dense concentrations of stars at their centers, will meet up, and the Milky Way and Andromeda will officially merge to become one big galaxy. Astronomers call the result Milkdromeda, but I prefer the name Milkomeda. I have no idea if that's what it will end up being called, but given the names we've been using so far, I think we can safely assume that whoever ends up making the official announcement will have a sense of humor. So what does this mean for us? The good news is that the solar system as a whole will probably survive the collision. While some stars will be ejected from the galaxy during the merger, the vast majority of them will just settle down into new orbits around the center of the Milky Way. That's because compared to the center of a galaxy, the solar system is pretty far out. But it doesn't mean everything will be hunky-dory. Even though our sun will probably continue orbiting the galactic core, the Earth might not be able to keep pace. And that would suck because then we wouldn't be in the habitable zone anymore. But according to some estimates, the chances of this happening are pretty low, about 1%. There is, however, a 10% chance that the Earth will get flung into the core of the galaxy where it will be met with temperatures hot enough to melt it. There is also a small chance that our solar system could leave the galactic neighborhood entirely, although how far it would travel depends on its speed after the collision. If it were flung away very fast, it could pass through the galaxy and never return. Or, if it were thrown away very slowly, it could end up trapped in orbit around the center of the galaxy, doomed to wander the galactic core for eternity. And yet, despite all the potential for disaster, the merger with Andromeda is actually a lucky break for the Milky Way. According to computer simulations, after the merger, the Milky Way will continue orbiting the center of the newly formed galaxy every 230 million years or so. And that's a good thing, because soon after that orbit, it will run smack dab into a trio of dwarf galaxies known as the Triangulum, Monoceros, and Canis major Overp dog groups. They're currently orbiting the Milky Way, but they won't be for long. In about 5 billion years, the combined mass of the three dwarf galaxies will be great enough to disrupt the Milky Way's orbit and send it hurtling toward the galactic core. Without the boost from its merger with Andromeda, the Milky Way would have been ripped apart. Instead, it will survive mostly intact and make a new friend. The Triangulum, Monoceros, and Canis major group is the closest thing the Milky Way has to a galactic supercluster. Galaxies like Andromeda, like most galaxies, are thought to reside in a larger structure of galaxies called a supercluster. But we can't see most of the Milky Way's supercluster because it lies beyond the observable universe. With all of the galaxies we can see, we can only spot a few members of the so-called local supercluster, which contains the Andromeda Galaxy along with about 50 other large galaxies and hundreds of smaller ones. Because the galaxies within a supercluster are bound together by gravity, the entire thing moves as a single unit through space, and the local supercluster is moving toward a place called the Great Attractor, a region of space with a very strong gravitational pull. So while we call them superclusters, they're more like galactic rafts floating through the universe, and they sometimes crash into each other. In 7 billion years, the local supercluster will smash into the nearby Antares cluster, triggering a cascade of collisions and mergers. The collision itself won't be nearly as dramatic as the merger of the Milky Way and Andromeda. There's just too much space between galaxies for that to happen. Instead, the galaxies will gradually drift closer together, then suddenly find themselves much closer than they are today. The proximity will be especially striking in our region of space. Andromeda will have merged with the Milky Way, then swung by the Triangulum, Monoceros, and Canis major group, which will have merged into a single dwarf galaxy. The two will pass so close that the combined galaxy will trigger yet another round of star formation in Andromeda. And while none of this will affect us directly, it will set the stage for the future cosmic neighborhood. Because after the collision with Andromeda, the Milky Way will have lost most of its angular momentum. Angular momentum is a fancy way of saying a thing's resistance to changes in motion. Planets farther out in the solar system have more angular momentum than those closer in because they farther away from the sun and moving faster. When you bring a bunch of things together and combine their angular momenta, the result has more angular momentum than any of the individual objects did on their own. That's why when the two galaxies collide, the resulting galaxy has less angular momentum than either of them did alone. And that means that in the future, other galaxies will have an easier time influencing the Milky Way's motion. In other words, it lines be easier for the galaxy to be pulled off course by the gravitational tugs of other galaxies and clusters. So while the collision with Andromeda will give us a bright new galaxy to stare at, the real reason we're excited is that it will set the stage for what happens next. Thank you for watching this episode, which was brought to you with the help of our patrons. If you would like to help support the channel and get fun perks like submitting a minion to be drawn by our artist, you can go to our support page.